If you want to buy a house as a homeowner or investor, which president would be better for you? Trump or Kamala? In this video, we're going to break down Trump and Kamala's policy positions and past actions using data and information from as many non-biased sources as possible to determine who we think will be better. We will go factor by factor and state our recommendation for who would be better in each one. First up, we have crime. Crime is important because as a homeowner, if your city or state or country has lots of crime, then no one is going to want to live there, making property values and rents decrease, and you won't be able to sell or rent out properties. If crime is down overall, then home prices will be able to increase and sell. Let's look at the violent and property crimes for Trump's administration, and then for Biden and Kamala's for their first 3 years in office. Violent crimes are things like murder, rape, and assault. Trump's violent crimes was 103.804 per 100,000 residents. Biden's was 111.576. So Biden's violent crime was 7.5% higher. Now let's look at property crimes. These are things like arson or break-ins. Trump's property crime average was 180.124 per 100,000 people, and Biden's was 159.803 per 100,000 people. Trump's property crime rate was 12.7% higher. So on property crimes, Biden and Kamala did better, but on violent crimes, Trump did better. I will give the edge to Trump on this one because violent crimes are way worse and will scare people off way more than property crimes will. But not only that, property crimes were trending downward for all of Trump's administration as it is with Biden's. Whereas the Biden administration had a violent crime increase, even though Trump's was trending downward, showing that it's more clear that some of Biden's policies might have affected the increase in violent crime. That's enough about the past. What are both of these candidates going to do to try to help or hurt crime? On Kamala's site, she touts delivering the largest investment in public safety with a $15 billion investment in law enforcement and community safety programs across 1,000 cities around the US. But it's hard to tell if this is actually what she believes or is just saying it to get elected. As I was doing research on her policy position, she said in an interview on Hot 97 in 2020, where she complained about cities' budget going towards policing instead of other areas. And so what it seems like happened is she realized that violent crime was going up, so she changed her position. It is a fact that more policing is better for less crime. There was a study done by the Journal of Public Economics titled More Cops, Less Crime. They looked at an increase of police and increased police funding in areas of high crime following the 2008 recession. And it showed that on average, each actual police officer prevented 4 violent crimes and 15 property crimes, especially in the areas that were poorest. So what will Trump do for crime in his next administration? Increased funding and support for law enforcement to deal with higher crime in cities and actually reducing scrutiny on what the police do. He wants to give them military-grade equipment to allow them to have more aggressive tactics to go after bad guys who deal with things like drugs and trafficking. So who will be better on crime? It's pretty clear that Trump has a harder stance on keeping things safe in this country, so I will give Trump the edge on this one. Let's move on to taxes. The more people get taxed, the less they have to spend on everything. And if they have less money to spend, the economy slows down. So higher taxes hurts the economy and lower taxes helps the economy. First, let's look at what Trump and Biden both have done in the past and what they proposed for taxes while they were in power. Trump signed the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act in 2017 that went into effect in the 2018 tax year, which means you didn't really see it until your refund until 2019. I know, it's confusing, right? As you probably know, there's these things called tax brackets, which basically say if you make money within this range, you pay a percentage of taxes. Trump lowered the tax brackets and tax percentage for almost all Americans. The only group that wasn't lowered was anyone making less than $10,000 a year. And if this is you, you gotta work on getting your bread up. Anyway, anyone making between $9,525 to $38,700, their tax rate was lowered from 15 to 12%. If you make between $38,700 and $82,500, your tax rate was lowered between 25 to 22%. If you made between $82,500 and $157,500, your tax rate was lowered from 28 to 24%. And then we can get to the higher income tax brackets. The bracket income ranges changed, but overall the taxes were lowered for most people. Now, most people who aren't investors take something known as a standardized deduction. It's money you can just take off of your taxes just for being you. He doubled it from $6,350 to $12,000, which means more people get to take more money off of the standard deduction just like that. Now, investors usually take what's known as itemized deductions. As a real estate investor, one of the itemized deductions you take is mortgage interest. This is something you can subtract from your taxable income. Trump actually lowered the cap cap you can take on this from 1 million to 750,000. And here's a few other things he's done. If you have children, he doubled the tax credit for any child you had under 17. The corporate tax rate used to be 35% and it got lowered to 21%. Now let's discuss what Biden and Harris administration have done. From them, there's been a lot of proposals, but not too much done. They proposed to raising the capital gains tax from 20% to 39.6% on people making over $1 million a year. They wanted to remove tax deductions for real estate investors, such as limiting the 1031 exchange and removing the stepped up basis. Long story short, all of these proposals would hurt you as a real estate investor, making you pay more money in taxes. Luckily, these have not been passed, but here's what's actually been affected. As part of the Inflation Reduction Act of 2022, which actually caused inflation, they have given $80 billion to the IRS in funding to hire thousands of more workers to do more audits so they can collect more tax revenue. They added a 1% tax on stock buybacks to try to incentivize companies to not buy back their stocks just so they can boost their value. They also added a 15% minimum tax on companies making $1 billion or more. They expanded child tax credits for 2021 from $2,000 to $3,000 for children 6 to 17 and $3,600 for children under 6. They made people who earn money from unemployment up to the first $10,200 exempt from federal taxes if you make a household income less than $150,000. He expanded the EV tax credit to up to $7,500 for new vehicles and $4,000 for used vehicles. Now, most of these changes aren't going to affect you directly unless if you bought an EV or you have a child in that time frame. Let's look at their policy proposals for the future. Kamala claims she wants to give working families a break. Now, to be honest, the only reason why they need a break is because of inflation and everything has gone through the roof in terms of cost. They want to provide 2 tax cuts, a child tax credit of up to $3,600 and a $6,000 first-year newborn tax credit. Both of these can incentivize people to have more children if costs are cheaper. They also want to have an earned income tax credit for up to $1,500 for people who don't have children. Her overall strategy is to raise taxes on corporations and rich people and give tax breaks to people who are in the middle or lower class. They want to tax unrealized capital gains of anyone who has over $100 million at 25%. This basically means if your investments went up only 8% a year and you had the minimum amount, which is $100 million, that means you earned $8 million in value. Then you would need to pay an extra $2 million in taxes. But the problem is because they're unrealized, that means you haven't realized them in your wallet yet. So in order to pay for these extra taxes, people might have to sell off assets, which could tank the economy, reducing people's 401ks, Roth IRAs, and reducing investments in the US, which hurts the economy overall. She wants to quadruple the tax on stock buybacks, increase long-term capital gains over $1 million from 20% to 28%, but she wants to increase a startup deduction from $5,000 to $50,000 to help startups fund their new businesses. She also wants to expand the low-income housing credit, which is used to build affordable homes. So what does Trump propose for taxes? On his site, he wants to lower taxes, giving people bigger paychecks and more jobs for the American workers. His strategy is a bit different, actually. He wants to tax imports from other countries like China while reducing taxes for companies and people in the US. He wants to create a free online university by taxing universities' endowment funds. They want to increase the child tax credit to $5,000. He wants to make the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act permanent, which is actually set to expire next year. He wants to remove tax on Social Security, remove taxes on tips and hourly overtime workers, and this can really help incentivize people to work more. He also wants to place a 60% tariff on Chinese products and a 10 to 20% tariff on other countries' products, and is even considering removing personal income taxes altogether. Man can dream. So who's better for taxes? I actually think that both of them have decent policies for both. Trump has better economy-wide tax benefits, which can indirectly help the real estate market, and honestly doesn't have any proposals that I'm against at all. Kamala, on the other hand, has better tax proposals that will help the housing market, which is really important right now. But at the same time, she has some policies that clearly just hurt the economy, like the tax on unrealized capital gains. If large investors start selling off their assets to pay taxes, it will really disincentivize investment around the US because you'll have to sell them to pay taxes. Assuming that that one didn't go through, I would actually vote for Kamala on this one. Assuming that it does, I have to give Trump this one. Now let's look at housing policy. Homelessness hit a record in America as of January this this year at 653,100 people. And we've had a 10x increase since 2019 of people spending more than 30% of their income on rent. The core issue is that house prices go up with inflation. So it's a two-pronged effect of being able to keep inflation down and increasing housing supply that will help solve the market. Here's what each candidate has done for housing in the past. Trump, in the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, created something known as opportunity zones. These are areas around the US that are economically distressed, where if you invest, and depending on how long you invest, you pay less or no money in taxes. If you keep a business open in that area for 10 years, you will pay no money on taxes. Reducing taxes always puts money in the pockets of people, so this way they can spend more on things that they want, which boosts the economy. In the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, Trump cut the mortgage interest deduction from $1 million to $750,000, which hurt people in higher cost states by reducing the amount of mortgage interest they could deduct. Also, they capped the state and local tax deduction. So if you had a property in high tax states like New Jersey, you could no longer deduct large amounts of property taxes. Trump also established the Council on Eliminating Regulatory Barriers for Affordable Housing, which had the goal of identifying and removing regulations that were making it harder to build affordable homes around the country. Now, Biden and Kamala haven't done too much for housing in specific except proposals. In the Build Back Better plan, they wanted to invest $150 billion in funding in affordable housing vouchers, construction of affordable rentals, and expand who could actually qualify for rental assistance to more low-income families, and incentivize zoning reform, which could be really good to help a lot of areas that are just single family and increase housing supply. They also proposed a $15,000 tax credit for first-time home buyers, which is terrible because it'll give more people more money to buy houses, which will increase demand, which will cause house prices to go up, not make them cheaper. But what do they both propose for the future of housing policy? Trump wants to allocate federal land for 10 brand new, what he calls freedom cities, and basically create a contest to award the best proposals for how the cities will be developed, with the goal of home ownership and the American dream. How he pays for that will be difficult to say, but in all reality, if we build new cities with cheap homes, that will really alleviate the amount of demand we have on these more expensive cities around the United States. Increasing supply is exactly what we need. Now, Harris has a few things that I think will really help, but also really hurt housing. First, she wants to build 3 million new homes around the United States. That would be amazing because it would really help out the supply issue we have. But again, I have no idea how this will be done or paid for, and what we need right now is supply of cheaper homes in expensive markets. On the other hand, she wants to now take the $15,000 tax credit that Biden proposed and turn that into a $25,000 tax credit. Let me just explain real quick why this is so bad. Housing, just like any market, is based on supply and demand. And right now, because we printed a bunch of money, there was extra demand because people had money to buy a house. And because after 2008, we stopped building homes as much as we used to, supply was down. So if we increase the demand, we need more houses to reduce the demand in order to get the real estate market to go down. This will only hurt buyers and help sellers. So while I like the first part of Harris's plan, I very much dislike the second part of Harris's plan, so I will give it to Trump on this one. Next, let's talk about their overall economic policy on things like the unemployment and how they affect the economy overall. First, let's look at the unemployment rate under Trump's term. When Trump took office in 2017, the unemployment rate is 4.7%. Right before COVID, it was at a low of 3.5%. Then it spiked up to 14.8% in April 2020 during the height of the pandemic, and then it went back down to 6.4% after he left office. Biden, on the other hand, when he inherited a 6.4%, got it down to 3.4% in April 2023, but since then it's actually gone back up to peaking last month at 4.3% to dropping back down to 4.1% today. Now, real GDP is another measurement of how good the economy is doing. Over Trump's first 3 years, it was 8.18%. Under Biden's, it was 9.03%. So Biden has the edge here. Inflation-wise, inflation was lower under Trump with an average of 2.12%, which is lower than normal, which is good. Under Biden, it's really hard to say how much of it is his fault and how much of it is Trump's fault that was printed during COVID, or really just COVID's fault. But his was an average of 5.60%, which is 2.5 times higher than Trump's inflation, which is exactly why everything feels super expensive right now. Now, for the stock market, inflation-adjusted returns for the S&P 500 under Trump's term was a gain of 46.33%, and under Biden's term, 26.1%, which is a little bit more than half of Trump's returns. So from the past, Biden and Kamala have an advantage with the real GDP, but have a worse inflation, worse stock market growth, and mixed unemployment versus Trump's before COVID unemployment. But what do they both have planned for the future? On Trump's side, he has his platform. He wants to end inflation and make America affordable again. To be clear, you can't end inflation because inflation is part of a healthy economy, but the goal is to keep inflation very low. He wants to make America the dominant energy producer, which could help keep energy costs down, and return manufacturing to the US, which could help manufacturing jobs. It's not exactly clear how he's going to do that, but in the past he did it by removing regulations and allowing businesses to make decisions with more money in their pocket. He also plans to have a government efficiency commission, which he hopes to have Elon Musk run, to make sure that they're spending not that much money. Now, this could really help keep inflation down by keeping our spending down very low. Kamala, on the other hand, wants to build an opportunity economy. According to her own economic agenda, here's what she has planned. She's going to try to keep grocery costs down by keeping food chains more resilient, break up big food corporations, and eliminate price fixing. And she wants to do similar things in medicine by capping costs of things. She wants to put a federal ban on price gouging to make it illegal to make excessive money on profits with food and groceries. She also wants to invest in small business. Besides the tax credit for startups, she wants to cut red tape to make it easier to get licensing and give standard deductions for small businesses. I don't think the standard deduction will help much because businesses like to take itemized deductions, but licensing can help. They also want to create a small business expansion fund to help entrepreneurs grow their businesses and create jobs with small to zero interest rate loans. Now, Trump had a better past, but has less outlined for the future than Kamala does, even though Kamala's history isn't that good. I'll call this a tie. What do I think will happen under a Trump presidency? I think Trump will be great for the economy as he was previously. Pre-COVID, everything was booming. Post-COVID, everything was more difficult to buy and expensive. I think under Trump, if he removes regulation and reduces taxes, it will help the economy overall. If we actually create these freedom cities, it'll be really cool to see innovation in home building and get people to move to new cities around the United States, reducing the demand in bigger cities, help bringing down those prices. So I think with his past, but a little bit of an unclear proposal for the future, I personally think the housing market will be more affordable for more people and improve for investors. What will I think will happen under Kamala presidency, on the other hand? I'm just a little bit more torn on how it will work with her. I would 100% argue that she has some more specific proposals that she wants to do on things that could be great, like the startup deduction or building 3 million new homes. But on the other hand, she has terrible ideas that will stifle economic growth, like going after companies she's claiming are being greedy and limiting their profit. If you limit companies' profits, they're disincentivized to run their business, which hurts the economy overall. So on one end, I think some of her proposals will really help, and on the other end, I think some of her proposals will actually really hurt. Ultimately, both candidates from an economic standpoint are at least highlighting the issues. Things are too damn high, people aren't making enough, and is straining the average person. At the end of the day, I think Trump's policies have a slight edge because he doesn't have as many negatives as Kamala's plan does. Either way, whoever wins, there will always be ways to make money. These people get to establish the rules, and we just need to adopt along the way. I hope you learned something about the other candidate in the highly politicized world. If you'd like my help to buy your first rental property, you can click the link in the description.